Psychologists are currently struggling to categorize anyone born between 1976 and 1985 because you simply do not fit the mold. You are the Xennials, the Oregon Trail generation, a micro-demographic trapped in the friction point between two completely different civilizations. You aren't cynical enough to be true Gen X, but you definitely aren't optimistic enough to be a millennial. You exist in the glitch. Let's look at why. Your childhood wasn't just different. It was strictly, brutally analog. If you were born in this window, you remember a world where boredom was a tangible, physical state. If you had nothing to do, you didn't scroll. You stared at the texture of the drywall until your brain hallucinated entertainment. There was no dopamine loop. There was just you and the room. Think about the stakes of entertainment. If you missed an episode of The X-Files or The Simpsons at 8 p.m. on a Sunday, it was gone, vanished into the ether. You couldn't stream it later. You couldn't look up the clip. You just had to go to school the next day and lie to your friends that you saw it so you wouldn't be socially exiled. Speaking of friends, meeting them required a level of military-grade commitment that modern humans can't comprehend. To make a plan, you had to call a landline, a physical object tethered to a wall, and hope their parents didn't answer. You made a verbal contract to meet at the mall fountain at 4 p.m. If you got there and they weren't there, you didn't text, "Where are you?" You just waited. You sat on a bench and waited. Blind trust was the only currency you had. But then something unprecedented happened. Right as your frontal lobe was finishing its construction, late teens, early 20s, the universe flipped a switch. The world went from analog to digital overnight. You were the guinea pigs. You went from passing folded, handwritten notes in the hallway to coding HTML on MySpace just to get glitter graphics on your profile. You navigated the screeching noise of dial-up internet to talk to strangers on AIM. You mastered T9 texting on a Nokia brick that could survive a nuclear blast. You are the only group of people in human history to have a fully analog childhood and a fully digital adulthood. And here is the cliffhanger. That specific timing didn't just give you nostalgia. It physically rewired your developing brain to give you a psychological advantage that the modern world is completely ignoring. Let's look at the hardware, because this isn't just about nostalgia. It is about biology. Research published in Nature Neuroscience confirms that the human prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for complex decision-making and impulse control, is still actively maturing well into your 20s. For Xennials, that critical window of brain development synced perfectly with the greatest technological leap in human history. Our brains were literally wiring themselves at the exact moment the world switched from analog to digital. This timing created a rare cognitive flexibility, a sort of tech bilingualism that no other generation possesses. We are the bridge. We can sit in a crowded restaurant, make sustained eye contact, and hold a deep, 3-hour conversation without feeling that phantom buzz in our pockets. We remember how to be human without an interface. But pivot to the workplace, and we aren't intimidated by new operating systems or AI tools. Why? Because we didn't just use apps. We grew up troubleshooting dial-up modems and hacking HTML code into our MySpace profiles just to make the background glitter. We learned to adapt to tech before it was user-friendly. That brings us to the most undervalued asset of the Xennial experience, the luxury of undocumented stupidity. Think about it. When we were 15 and did something absolutely mortifying, it didn't go viral. It didn't get stored on a server in a desert to be pulled up by an HR director 20 years later. We had disposable cameras. You took 24 terrible photos, waited a week to develop them, and if they were bad, you physically threw them in the trash. They were gone. We had the freedom to be awkward, to fail, and to reinvent ourselves without a permanent digital footprint anchoring us to our worst moments. But just as we were riding that high, feeling confident with our privacy intact and our degrees in hand, reality hit us with a shovel. We stepped out of the safety of education and straight into the meat grinder of the 2008 financial crisis. This wasn't just a recession. it was a complete rug pull. We were the generation told that if we followed the rules, went to university, and took on the debt, the jobs would be waiting. Instead, we walked onto the job market at the exact moment the global economy collapsed. Entry-level positions evaporated overnight. Paid work was replaced by the opportunity of unpaid internships. We watched our parents' retirement funds vanish and our own career ladders burn down before we even stepped on the first rung. That specific trauma, hitting right at the start of our adult lives, rewired us again. It installed a permanent background operating system of fear, a lingering gut-level belief that no matter how stable your life looks today, the entire system could crash again tomorrow. You are living in a state of permanent psychological vertigo. That is the core of the Xennial paradox. You possess the muscle memory of an analog world while operating with the hyperspeed reflexes of a digital native. It creates this unique, vibrating friction where you are constantly mourning the death of patience. You remember what it felt like to be truly, deeply bored, to stare at a ceiling for an hour with absolutely zero dopamine hits. And you actually miss it. You miss the safety of being unreachable. But here is the twist. You also love the chaos. You have perfectly merged that cynical, latchkey independence of Gen X, the figure-it-out-yourself grit, with the early, hopeful connectivity of the millennial internet. You remember when the web felt like a community library, not a surveillance battlefield. You are the only group in history that can hold these massive contradictions without snapping. You appreciate the infinite reach of the cloud, but you don't fully trust it because you know the pain of a corrupted floppy disk. This specific tension doesn't make you weird or obsolete. It makes you the ultimate adapter. If you feel like an outsider who doesn't quite fit with the older cynics or the younger influencers, stop apologizing for it. That cultural homelessness is actually your greatest superpower. You are the masters of the transitional lifestyle. In a world that changes faster than anyone can predict, you are the steady hand because you've already survived the biggest shift in human communication history. You are the bridge generation. You are the translators who keep society from splitting in two. You know how to leverage the future without losing the humanity of the past. That is a legacy worth protecting. If this deep dive resonated with you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and consider joining as a channel member to support the channel. Now, click this video right here. It explores why your specific brand of nostalgia is actually a psychological survival mechanism. I'll see you there.